One of the countries most affected by the US-Israeli war on Iran is neighbouring Iraq, which has been targeted by both sides in the conflict. Baghdad has close links with both the United States and Iran, and it was one of the first governments to call for de-escalation early in the war. But it has also suffered from an awful lot of attacks by both Tehran and by the United States and Israel. And for more on this, I can welcome Hayder al-Shakeri, who is a research fellow with the Middle East and North Africa programme at Chatham House in London. Good morning, Hayder, and thank you for joining us. How concerned is Iraq at overspill from the conflict, basically infecting its own domestic situation?
Good morning, and thank you for having me. It is very concerning, and Iraq is in a tight position right now because, as you mentioned, both the U.S. and Israel, both the U.S. and Iran are close allies to Iraq. Iraq needs both countries. Iraq shares huge borders with Iran, while with the U.S., all of the money and the security agreements for Iraq are there. So Iraq is in a tightrope, and the prime minister right now is trying to balance these relationships while getting pushed from different directions, from the own political elite inside the country, but also from both Iran and the US, where they're pushing in different directions towards escalation to the other side. The prime minister has called for both ambassadors for Iran and the US to call for de-escalation, to call for stopping the attacks on Iraq. But those attacks are only continuing and increasing. They're targeting various sources, and not just the PMF or Iran-aligned groups, but others, including the Ministry of Defense, Peshmerga forces, which are the Kurdish forces, and even civilian infrastructure in the country, which is becoming more and more dangerous for Iraq and Iraqis. And this is not just militarily, so economically as well. Iraq depends on the US a lot because all of Iraq's oil money goes to the US before it comes to Iraq. At the same time, Iraq depends a lot on the Hormuz Strait because Iran is now controlling the Hormuz Strait. All of its oil, 90% almost of its oil, goes through the strait. So all of this making Iraq in a very tough position, and it's the only country in this war where it's being bombed by both sides and also from within.
Now, as you mentioned there, the war has had widespread economic repercussions. Some of them come from the same root as is the case with Iraq, such as the Strait of Hormuz and the blockade there. But are there particular economic challenges that the war is causing in Iraq that go beyond that?
Yes, definitely. So Iraq has announced force majeure in most of its oil fields in the south. Now more than 70 or 80% of oil production has stopped in the country, and this is causing further stress over Iraq, the production of electricity, of various fuel and various things. In addition to that, all of Iraq's imports is coming from either the Strait of Hormuz or from land crossing. The majority of them are now closed, especially the ones that are with Iran. Right now, Iraq is trying to take care of its people by relying on whatever reserves that it has. But as the situation escalates and as things become harder, the society will suffer the most, and Iraqis can see that. Iraqis have depended on their government for 2 decades after the 2003 war, after the invasion, and they still depend on the government that hasn't really had the economic buffers or the cushions that are necessarily will protect them from such conflicts or such big repercussions.
Now, the bombing of Iran was not entirely unexpected, but the fallout in the region was perhaps not anticipated. Is there a sense that Iraq has left itself exposed to regional headwinds like this, or is it all out of its hands?
Well, Iraq has been seeing this, and during the 12-day war, Iraq stayed relatively away from the conflict, despite being so close to Iran. Iran-aligned actors in Iraq also stay quiet and did not do much. But this is different, and this is some sort of an existential threat to Iran, especially after the killing of Ayatollah Khamenei. So Iraqis are seeing this, and Iran-aligned actors inside Iraq have joined this fight. They decided that this is also their fight, and that dragged Iraq into the war. At the same time, the U.S. saw it as an opportunity. The U.S. and Israel saw it as an opportunity to go after the Iran-aligned actor within Iraq, which is the forces that are part of the PMF, certain forces, to go after them and start decapitating their leadership, start attacking them. But the thing is, within the PMF, and this is something that many get wrong, the PMF is a very wide range of actors. Some of them are aligned with Iran, some of them are not, some of them are very much Iraqi nationals. And now the bombing is targeting, different categories of those, and not just the Iran-aligned ones, to the extent that even army bases are being targeted right now by the U.S. And this is calling for increased escalation by the Iraqi Prime Minister, and the political forces inside Iraq are pushing the Prime Minister to take further action. So the impact is being seen. There were some anticipation of this, but sadly, because Iraq's internal politics are messy right now, Iraq is in the process of forming a government. There were elections late last year, and so far there is no fully functional government. We're still in an acting government. So all of this is keeping Iraq sort of unstable politically, and this has the implications over the regional conflict and Iraq's position within this conflict and war.
Now, you say there are calls for the government to take action. Is there absolutely anything the government can do in the face of these attacks?
Well, so right now, many of the foreign missions inside Iraq are leaving, or some of them have very minimal presence. These forces are calling also for the expulsion of the U.S. embassy. But Iraq can't do much. Iraq needs the U.S. The U.S. is a very strategic defense and an economic partner to Iraq, and as to many countries in the region. And at the same time, when it comes to escalation militarily, Iraq can't do much as well, because Iraq cannot control its own airspaces. Iraq depends a lot on the U.S. When it comes to security agreements, dependent on them as well when it came to fighting ISIS within the international coalition in general. So all of this is showing that Iraq is in a very tough spot, and as the war escalates, Iraq will find itself more and more in a position where it can't do much. So the only position is to de-escalate and to try to talk to the different actors, because as mentioned, Iraq has good relations with the U.S. And Iraq has good relations with Iran. So one of the things that Iraq can do is to talk to both actors and try to push towards de-escalation, which is something that Iraqis hoped they can do before. But because of the internal dynamics and the messy government formation process that's happening right now, it is proving difficult right now.
Thank you very much for that, Hayder al-Shakeri, who's Research Fellow with the Middle East and North Africa Programme at Chatham House in London.